Yes, hello. Today I would like to tell a story of two young individuals, two young men that got felon charges and how it affected their lives. This first individual was named Smokey. Smokey was 18 years old. He was sitting in his car. An unidentified man walked up to him, pulled a gun out. Smokey, in return, pulled his gun out and shot the officer in the shoulder. The officer did not identify himself as an officer, is what Smokey said while he was in court. And he wasn't dressed as an officer. So after shooting the officer in the shoulder, in return, fire with the officer, he did 5 years. During the 5 years, he was 18 years old, his first felon. He did 5 years. He got his GED, his CNA certificate while he did the 5 years in jail, while he was incarcerated. After he got out from doing 5 years, Smokey was 23 years old. He went and looked for work at the hospitals, nursing homes, everywhere, doctor's office, being a certified nurse assistant. He was seeking work. He had a new baby. I believe she was his fiancée. They were about to get married. He had a fiancée, a new baby. He applied for work, like I said, everywhere, and couldn't find work. Nobody would hire him. So from that point, Smokey began selling street drugs again, weed and a little cocaine, possibly. He went to some guys to sell drugs. It was a bad drug deal. It was a setup. Smokey almost lost his life. He was shot up 9 times. He laid up in the hospital and recovered from that. And because he was already a certified nurse assistant and felt defeated while he was trying to get work, he went back to selling street drugs again, even though he had almost lost his life selling the drugs. He went back to selling drugs, and eventually Smokey got locked up and charged again and got 15 years after that because he had cocaine and weed again, like I said. He was selling the street drugs. So by the time he would get out, he would be like 39, almost 40 years old. The second case I would like to discuss with you is about this young man in Gary, Indiana. And I call this story Underground because this young man, he felt like he was in a big spin that he couldn't get out and didn't have no way out. He felt trapped. So in other words, just to say, young man Gary, he said that the corpse was the 3 blind monkeys, meaning that you don't hear a voice, they don't hear you, and you don't speak or they don't see you. So that means no hear, no speak, or no see. The 3 blind monkeys was the court system, is what this young man said. He said felons they lose all their rights and they have no voice. He has to go to the underground world. Living underground world life means you have to make your means of money tax-free. You have to make tax-free money. Tax money that's made under the table in order to support yourself. That's the underground world. He also mentioned that he was afraid to go outside because he was in an environment of poverty and guns. His friends had guns and they lived a rough life, living in the ghettos is what he called it. He constantly drank. He was fearful of going outside because he thought if he'd hang with his friends, somebody would have a gun on them or get pulled over or something by the officers. Maybe somebody have a bag of weed on them. That would go against his probation. It would revoke his probation if he were to be caught with anybody around with drugs or guns. So he was scared to go outside. He stayed in the house and constantly drank. He used to send his nephews out to bring him about half pints to a pint every day. Daily he drank. And eventually he started hearing voices. And from that point he applied for disability, some type of social security, some means of supporting himself, and to try and get help for this depressed state that he ran himself into from drinking. He went on that drinking binge and fell into a state of depression. Couldn't find his way out. So now he gets a check to support himself, but now he finds himself a prisoner within himself because he's being controlled and limited by the medications that he's been issued for his depression and bipolar schizophrenic state is what he's been diagnosed with. So when you're diagnosed with that, how do you get yourself back on track? And Smokey's case, Smokey got 15 years. By the time he get out, he's going to be 39 years old. How does he support himself? He's already tried rehabilitation. When he was 18, he got out at 23. He had his CNA license. He got his diploma. He came out looking for work, and no one would hire him. So he went back to selling street drugs because he couldn't find work, and ended up getting 15 years behind that.
So it is a vicious cycle.
Yes. And the young man, like I said, being schizophrenic, he's just lost in the system now. That I feel like there's no getting him back because he's drinking himself to death. His liver is shutting down. He weeps and cries and sit in dark rooms in the house now and rocks. So I feel like there's no reaching him. He'd wasted away in a vicious cycle that when he was reaching out and crying then for help, and he felt like he was not being heard or seen, and no one has a voice for young men like him that are felons because they have no rights, they have no voice, they can't vote, lose the right to vote, and other things, even finding work for themselves.
So it's a lost population then, lost population of men.
So how would we stop that vicious cycle? How could we get, even though he's rehabilitated in jail, for employers to hire them and give them a second chance?
What do we do?
What do we do? Because Smokey could have felt the same way that Gary felt and stayed in the house, caged himself up and drank.
But instead, he went out into the same environment.
Instead, he went right back out into the system and environment the way he's used to supporting himself, which is the underground that Gary referred to. And that's making tax-free money any way you can. And the most prosperous way was selling drugs.
So do you believe expungement then for felons would be the proper thing to do? To expunge their felony charges so that they can get back on track. Sounds like that's the thing to do.
I would like to see that felons could have a voice and have the rights to get some type of program or have a lawyer to represent them to get the charges expunged, considering the severity or the degree of the felony charges. If there is no death or anything like that, then I feel like they should have a second chance in society to be reformed or get a job to support themselves, or else it'll be a vicious cycle of getting alcoholism and schizophrenia, depression.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you all.